So this morning, the World Radio Day 2022 is not very far away. The theme for this year's 11th World Radio Day on 13 February is Radio and Trust. Joining me to talk about the event is Mirta Lourenço, UNESCO's Chief Media Development and Media and Information Literacy. Thank you for joining me on RedTech, Mirta. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, and hello, everybody.
Now, Mirta, you chose trust as your theme for a very specific reason. Tell us.
Well, with these times of COVID, people really expect what from media and from radio in particular. They expect accurate and reliable information. Lives are at stake. And if you remember when the pandemic broke, we were hearing whatever on the news, that we had to eat garlic, that we had to drink wine, we didn't have to drink wine. I mean, there was a large spread of error in the information, but also sometimes lies and sometimes fabricated news. And I think people realize that if lives are at stake, we need to rely on the source of the news, and we need to have trust. And everything that happened during pandemic has actually lowered a bit the level of trust in media. But what is interesting is that it has also lowered the trust in social media, but radio has kept a loyal bunch of listeners, and people have confidence in radio. So it has been the winning media in a way, if we can say so, in this pandemic.
The thing, though, is that like every medium, there are so many sources of information that are flowing to individuals that work in those media, the professionals, the journalists, etc. Information from medical sources, then there's other stuff from other professionals, and so on and so on. And with so much misinformation flowing, as you've described, do radio stations have the resources to ensure that they can verify information and make sure that it's credible before they broadcast? And some people say that's as a result of experience. You need experienced journalists, but increasingly it's harder to keep experienced journalists. They're very expensive. So how does that work?
Well, in terms of it being expensive, yes. And this is something that perhaps listeners don't know or have not realized, that for the radio stations to bring this trustworthy information, they have to invest a lot in the skills of the people who work in radio, and also in checking and verifying quickly every single information or content they are going to put out there. And that this is perhaps the basic difference with social media, is that the reputable, at least the radio stations, will not put out whatever content. However, from the side of the radio stations, this fact-checking has always been the DNA of people working in radio and in media in general. You know, the very well-known motto, if your mother says she loves you, you go and check it out. And this is what has always underlined independent and credible journalism. So for many radio reporters, verifying the sources and fact-checking, let's say, it's a way of life. Now what has happened is that some social media companies have realized the importance of fact-checking, but they don't have the skills that the radio stations and the media have, you know. But they have, some of them, realized how important to keep your a certain loyalty in your audience or in the users, that you need to have these skills. And they are willing to pay for them. So what we have is some media who are selling their fact-checking as a very serious way and methods to be able to expose propaganda, to expose falsehood, and to avoid unverified rumors to circulate, because this spread of unchecked information actually in some cases weakens societies, can lead to riots, can lead to violence, to hate online, and in the society. And actually, there is the International Fact Checking Network, that is also an organization of fact checkers that also get together, so that these new fact checking that are, or fact checkers that are popping up, that they are not manipulated by those who weaponize information, let's say. So yes, it is expensive, but it's a necessary expense to be able to continue to be the credible source that radio is.
You were just mentioning, this the conglomeration of people who are checking the fact checkers and so on. Is there a resource that journalists around the world, particularly working in community radio, where of course the resourcing is the most poor, is there a central place they can go check these things, or they're just going to have to
Yes.
find them? Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, the first I would say to go close to the International Fact Checking Network, because it operates worldwide, and they can recommend fact checkers, let's say in different geographical regions, different
Right.
continents, and different places.
Yeah.
And then, yes, it's it is a skill. What I want to highlight is that it's a skill that has always been there as the backbone, let's say, of serious radio broadcasting. It's just, I could say, people have not realized how important it is, and it has been this period of COVID, where they didn't know what to trust anymore,
Yeah.
that they have turned to radio and to media in general, those serious media outlets, because they know that there, I mean, the information is serious. So on this World Radio Day, what we want radio stations is to show their listeners how they do, how do show the backstage. How do you do to verify what beforehand what you are going to tell the audience? How do you do to hold the powerful accountable? How
Yeah.
do radio stations do to resist pressure from business groups and from political groups and from ideological groups and all these, so that they can reach out with a service to the public, because this is expensive, and this is however what gives you a loyal base of listeners, and which afterwards will be what you will capitalize as a radio station to survive economically.
Yes. So let me ask: is the challenge that stations that are in developing markets different from the challenge faced by radio stations in mature markets, in your view?
Yes and no, I would say. I would say that all radio stations have financial challenges, but the nature and the scale of the challenges will vary. And these challenges, you can focus them on, you can analyze them from different angles. The very first one is the macroeconomic situation, let's say. Is there a supportive environment in general? The domestic conditions, are there resources and capabilities, let's say, to maintain the existence of radio stations? This may be easier in some developed countries more than in developing ones, because radio stations, to exist, they need also a capital environment. They need a financial environment, so that they can have capital for investment, they can have capital for reinvestment, because the radio stations spend a lot of funds in facilities, in equipment, in infrastructures. So this macro situation may be fragile in developing countries, that in general there is no capital or a financial market that does not operate correctly, with black markets, with blue dollar, black dollar, whatever, different
Yeah.
currency exchanges. Then you need also the legal let's say, environment for radio stations and for media, let's say, in general. I say this because in some countries still, for example, community radio is not recognized, or they have difficulties in obtaining frequencies. Or actually, not only community media, other radio stations also have difficulties in obtaining frequencies and licenses, or they are affected because of the digital transition. It has not been thought the same terms for private radio stations than for community radio stations. So all this, let's call it legal framework, will also affect more the radio stations that are operating in countries that do not yet have, let's say, the support they need to
Mm.
develop. And this may also happen in a developed country,
Sure.
uh, but it's more proclive to arrive in developing economies.
Got it.
Then you have even more things which are specifically for radio stations. Like, for example, what does the media environment look like? Are there many media organizations in general, newspapers, TV, internet, webcasters, and in radio specifically? And also what type of radio ownership you have. Do you have many private radio stations? Do you have monopolies? Do you have satellite radio? And the other factor that may affect or make differ developing and developed countries is the media, let's say, or the radio labor market. Are you able to find these reporters who are skilled? And if you find them, can you retain them? Do you have a good? Does the country have a good salary scale? Do they receive, I don't know, any kind of support or training to develop as professionals, etc. So you see, these are the type of conditions that will affect radio stations if they are in a developed country or in a developing one. You have the macro aspects,
Mhm.
financial and legal, and then you have the specific media market conditions.
Yeah. Okay, so looking at listening data from various markets around the world, and this is both sometimes both in developed markets and developing markets, young people are faced with more choice than ever before.
Yes.
And as a result of that, some of them are choosing alternatives other than radio because they've not had the radio habit. Someone like myself grew up, and that was the medium before television arrived. Even that's how old I am. But we always had a habit of listening to the radio. That habit is no longer possibly part of many young people's lives. So, how can the trend of young people listening less to radio, or not choosing it at all, you think that's possible to turn around?
I think this is more for developed countries.
Okay.
Because the digital divide is something very specific and that does exist, but sometimes we don't want to look at it. But more or less 4 billion people in the world, to give you a large figure, are not connected to internet. And these numbers, you can find them in the website of ITU, which is one of the UN organizations dealing with the technological part, let's say, of our lives. And then there are differences between rural and urban areas. Now, where this does occur, I would suggest two ways. And the first one is to begin with, include young people in the radio production and broadcasting, because in general, we find radio programs addressed to young people which are produced by adults and even older adults. So UNESCO has published a resource linking generations through radio, which is
Mhm.
available at unesco.org, free of charge. And we give ideas on how radio stations can include young people in their production teams at different levels. From the very easy one of having more young people being interviewed to the more complex one of assigning a regular radio program to young people. And we give very specific tips. What do you need to think of? Do you need parents' consent, etc., etc.?
Mm. Mm.
What I do think also is that young people, it's not that they don't listen to, it's that they listen differently, and they
Mm.
listen to podcasts a lot, and they listen to music a lot, and through internet. So they will not turn on perhaps the FM or FM transistor, but they will listen to some podcasts through their different devices.
Yes.
So in this area, I have a very specific tip, maybe a bit innocent if you wish, but I think it works,
Mhm.
which is um, for any adult out there uh, who would like to give the experience of radio to young people, just don't offer them an AM FM radio transistor. Offer them a DAB plus in
Mhm.
English,
Mhm.
because the DAB plus operates like a tablet in the sense that you can listen to webcasts, to podcasts, to music, but also programs and stories and whatever from everywhere in the world. So wherever you are, you can tune into Nigeria, you can tune into podcasts which are broadcast in Ghana, in Barbados, in Jamaica. So it gives the worldwide experience, which is what young people are used to. They go
Yeah.
to internet and they find content from everywhere in the world. That's their life. So this you can find it. But on top of that, the DAB Plus gives them an experience of sound quality that they will for sure not find in neither in the phone nor in the tablet.
Mm.
So that they really can appreciate the sound.
Right.
Because the other problem that we have associated with this, or well, challenge, let's call it like this, is that young people are used to compressed sound. They don't know
Sure.
anymore
Sure.
what normal sound is.
Yes.
So they are not used to listening with micro silence and all this that comes from the world of sound.
Mm.
And so the experience when you listen with this excellent sound quality is so overwhelming, I would say, that then their
Mm.
favorite podcasts they will turn to listen them with this type of device.
It's a great tip. I didn't know about it at all, so I think that's probably fresh information for a lot of people.
Because
Yeah.
I have adolescents, twins,
Sure. Sure. And you've
teenagers.
seen you've seen it work. You've seen how it can work.
All
Yeah,
their
which is
friends
great.
were fascinated because they had
Yes.
never seen this rectangle that broadcast noise sound. It was
Sure.
so cool, so
Yeah. Yeah.
original. They had not realized this existed. Probably their parents are using a normal radio, but they didn't realize.
Yes.
And yes, it 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 made it works.
Yeah. Brilliant. Let's wrap up. So UNESCO's support of World Radio Day is very extensive and it's also free.
Yes.
So how can radio stations tap into these resources? Are there specific places they need to go,
Oh,
sites?
yes, they go to worldradioday.org
Yeah.
or unesco.org and they type World Radio Day, and there we have different audios and in some cases there are video clips and banners and everything radio stations can use.
Yes.
They can also use the document, which has as a title 13 ideas to celebrate 13th of February, which are
Hmm.
simple ideas, but for example, this year we gave ideas on how could you celebrate trust with your listeners,
Right.
so that it doesn't stay an abstract concept. What specifically you must do so that you show or you make your listeners realize that they trust you as a radio broadcaster.
Mm.
And at the bottom of the page, you will find the previous World Radio Day celebrations. And of course, all that material is also copyright free and can be used a piacere, let's say, as they wish.
Mm.
What what has happened throughout the years is that World Radio Day has been a trending topic in Twitter. We always get to first place or third place as a world trending
Right.
topic. And this is just because radio stations are so happy celebrating the radio that they, elevate the radio in a way.
Yeah.
They elevate the
Brilliant.
day.
That's fantastic. It's great to know that there's this support from UNESCO and from yourself and your team, Mirta. RedTech as well, as a publication that celebrates radio, looks forward to World Radio Day with the entire audio and radio industry. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, RedTech, and thank you, everybody out there. Happy World Radio Day.